I still remember the smell of fresh ink on crisp banknotes the first time I walked into this office. Not as a customer, not as an employee, but as the new owner. This morning, sunlight spills through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the gold frame of my nameplate. Zara Khalid, chairwoman. My fingers trace the letters absent-mindedly as I smooth the cuff of my silk blouse. The soft fabric whispers against my skin, grounding me in this reality I built with my own hands. My assistant knocks softly. "Ma'am, there's a couple waiting in the lobby. They're here about a loan application." Something in her tone makes me look up. She hesitates, then adds, "They said they know you. It's your parents." For a moment, the room feels too quiet. The ticking of the expensive wall clock seems louder than my own breath. I glance at my reflection in the glass wall, hair perfectly pinned, lipstick a muted red, every inch the woman I fought to become, and yet, my heart gives a sharp, traitorous twist. Of all the people to walk through my bank's doors today, it had to be them. I pick up my phone, more to steady my hands than to make a call, and let out a slow breath. "Send them in," I tell her. My voice is calm, but inside me, 2 decades of pride, hurt, and quiet determination rise to the surface. Today, they'll learn who I really am. I was 22 the night everything changed. It was monsoon season, and the rain had been pounding the tin roof for hours. I stood in our cramped kitchen clutching the proposal I'd worked on for weeks, a plan to start a small online boutique. I had savings, but I needed a little more. Just enough to buy inventory and build a proper website. My father sat at the table reading the newspaper, glasses low on his nose, while my mother kneaded dough with mechanical precision. I cleared my throat. "Abba, Amma, I need to talk to you." They both looked up. My voice was shaking, but I pressed on, laying the papers on the table. "I have a business plan. If you could lend me just 2 lakhs, I can launch this. I've done the math. I can pay you back within a year, maybe less." For a moment, there was silence. Then my father laughed. "Zara, stop with these childish fantasies. You're a girl. This is not for you. Go apply for a teaching job or something respectable." My throat tightened. "But Abba, I've done the research. This could work. I just need—" "Enough." His hand came down on the table, rattling the glasses. "I will not waste money on your silly dream. You think you know better than me?" My mother's voice was softer, but cut just as deep. "Your cousin Sanaa just got engaged. Why don't you focus on your own marriage instead of this nonsense?" Heat burned behind my eyes. My fingers curled into fists, nails biting into my palm. I'd expected hesitation, maybe even a lecture, but not this humiliation. Something in me snapped. I folded the papers slowly, carefully, even though my hands were shaking. My grandmother's silver pendant, the one she gave me when she said, "Child, never let anyone tell you what you cannot be," felt suddenly heavy around my neck. "Fine," I said quietly. "You don't believe in me, but one day you will." I walked out into the rain that night, proposal clutched to my chest, mascara running down my cheeks. The streets smelled of wet earth and diesel, the air cold against my skin. And right there, shivering in the downpour, I made a silent vow. I would never ask them for help again. The first months were brutal. I rented a tiny room above a mechanic shop, where the smell of grease mixed with the scent of instant noodles I ate night after night. I sold old jewelry to buy my first laptop and spent hours teaching myself everything from digital marketing to basic accounting. My days blurred together. Waking before sunrise, answering emails from suppliers in different time zones, packing orders by hand, falling asleep at my desk with my grandmother's pendant clenched in my fist. I doubted myself 100 times. There were nights when I cried so hard my pillow stayed damp till morning. But each time, I remembered my father's laughter, that sharp sting of dismissal, and it lit a fire under me. Then came the first breakthrough. A stranger placed an order worth 10,000 rupees. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, heart pounding, whispering, "This is it." Soon after, I met Aliyah, a seasoned entrepreneur who ran a logistics firm. She saw something in me, maybe the hunger, maybe the fight, and took me under her wing. "Never let anyone shame you for ambition," she told me one night as we packed shipments together. "Ambition is survival with better clothes on." With her guidance, I streamlined my business, got better suppliers, and started scaling. My little boutique turned into a recognizable online brand. Every milestone felt like a private victory. My first profitable quarter. My first employee. The day I paid my rent 6 months in advance, cash. When distant relatives asked how I was doing, I kept my answers vague. "Oh, just working," I'd say with a polite smile. Nothing big. Inside, I was building something far bigger than they could imagine. Years passed. The boutique grew into a company. Then came an opportunity one could never have predicted. A struggling local bank went up for sale. Most people saw a failing institution. I saw a way to control my own capital, to never have to beg for funding again. It took everything I had, savings, investors, sleepless nights, but eventually the papers were signed. The first time I walked into the bank as its owner, I remembered the girl who had once been told she wasn't worth a loan. And I smiled. The door to my office opened with a soft click. They stepped inside hesitantly, my father first, stiff as always, my mother trailing behind, clutching her dupatta like it was the only thing holding her together. For a moment, they just stared. The room was nothing like the home they knew me in. Sunlight spilled across polished marble floors. A modern art piece, my first expensive indulgence, hung proudly on the far wall. Fresh lilies filled the air with a clean, sharp scent. My father's eyes swept the room, landing on the gold plaque on my desk. I watched the exact second he read it. His lips pressed into a thin line. I gestured toward the chairs. "Please sit." They sat, both of them looking strangely small in the oversized leather seats. My assistant brought in tea, and for a few moments, the only sound was the clink of porcelain. My father finally cleared his throat. We came about alone," he said gruffly, as though the words tasted bitter. I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, my red heel catching the light. "I know. I read your application myself." Their heads snapped up. "You?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes," I said evenly. "This is my bank. I'm the chairwoman. I review every major case, personally." The silence that followed was almost physical, thick, heavy, charged. My father looked away first. My mother blinked rapidly, like she wasn't sure whether to cry or smile. "How?" she began, then stopped, her hands twisting in her lap. I gave them the truth they had never asked for. "The business you refused to fund? I built it anyway. I worked, I saved, I scaled, and I bought this bank. Every inch of this place, from the pens on the counters to the vault in the basement, has my signature on it." My father's mouth opened, then closed. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders slumping as though the weight of every decision he'd ever made had just landed on him. I let the silence stretch, let them sit with the reality of who I'd become. Then I smiled, not cruelly, but with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who has nothing left to prove. "You came here for a loan," I said softly. "Let's discuss the terms." I folded my hands on the table and looked at them the way any banker would. Except this was more than a business transaction. "The loan will be approved," I said. My father's head snapped up, relief flickering across his face. "But there will be conditions." He frowned. "What kind of conditions?" "The kind that money alone can't fix." I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of every year, every scar, every sleepless night that had led to this moment. "First," I said, turning to my father, "you will stop dismissing me in front of others. No more jokes about me being too ambitious or too stubborn. That girl you laughed at built this empire." He didn't argue, he just stared at me, jaw tight. "Second," I continued, "you will support Sanaa and Hiba when they pursue their own dreams, even if those dreams don't look the way you expect. No comparing them to anyone, no telling them what they can't do. They deserve better than that." My mother's eyes softened, and she nodded quickly, almost eagerly. "And lastly," I said, my voice quieter now, "we will have dinner once a month. Not here, not in my office. At my home. Not to talk about business, just to talk. Like a family should have. My father blinked, clearly surprised. You want us to come to your home? Yes, I said, my throat tight but steady. But on my terms, respectfully, as equals. The room went still again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was heavy with something else. Realization. Maybe even remorse. My father looked down at his hands, rough and lined from years of work. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. All right, he said. We'll do it. I nodded once, letting the decision settle. For the first time since they'd walked in, I saw it, not just the guilt, but pride. Pride they couldn't quite put into words. And for the first time in years, I felt something too, not vindication, not revenge, but release. 2 weeks later, they came to my home for the first time. I watched from the doorway as my mother's eyes swept over the space, the soft lighting, the art-lined walls, the faint smell of freshly brewed coffee. My father stayed quiet, but I caught him glancing at the bookshelf where my first business plan, framed, stood proudly. We sat together, awkward at first, until conversation began to flow. Not about money, not about success, about little things. Old recipes. Neighbors we used to know. For a moment, it felt almost like the home I'd wanted years ago. After they left, I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing the silver pendant still resting against my collarbone. I thought about the girl who had stood in the rain, mascara streaked, heartbroken, vowing never to ask for help again. She had kept her promise. And now, she was no longer just surviving. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city, my city, alive and glowing under the night sky. My parents refused me a loan once, I said softly, as if confessing to the stars. Now, I own their bank. And for the first time, I smiled not out of pride, not out of pain, but out of peace.